Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is July 19th. We're about 1 week short of 2 months that I have not posted anything on Preacher with Parrots. I was trying to wait and make sure that everything was settled, and it's partly because my personal business got in the way. And I didn't have as much time to dedicate to getting the Preacher with Parrots and YouTube thing settled. But we will start. Um, I have been recording. I haven't been doing extra recordings, but I have been recording our teaching sessions. We're going to mention a little bit from Leviticus 25. I think we will get very close to the end of the book of Leviticus. You'll notice that Leviticus and Levi are very similar. And these are the rules for the priests and the Levites and how and what they will do in the temple. All right, this is the Sabbath year. I'm going to read some, but first let me tell you what it was. You remember that the Sabbath was one of the 10 Commandments. At first, all the emphasis is on resting. Later, we hear about resting and worship. But mostly it's resting. Throughout this part of the Bible, we also get about resting the land, resting the animals, resting the people. So God said, you have 6 days to work, and on the seventh day you rest. They also had a sabbatical year. At this particular time in history, they are living from the manna that God is dropping on the earth, on the land. Sunday through Friday, I should say Sunday through Thursday, they pick up enough for one day. On Friday, they pick up enough for 2 days because they're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, they're supposed to rest. If during the week they pick up too much, it goes bad. But if on Friday morning, because the Sabbath begins when the sun goes down Friday evening, if on Friday morning when the sun comes up and the manna's on the ground, they get enough for 2 days for each person, it doesn't go bad. It's God's plan of taking care of them. So don't wonder what they're going to eat if they're not going to farm for a while. This is how they're going to survive. So every week had a Sabbath. But every 6 years they worked and then had a sabbatical year in which they didn't work the land. And God provided for them through the manna. Now, in addition, when they have had 7 Sabbaths, 7 sabbatical years, not days, but when they have gone 6 years and rested, a year, another 6 years and rested a year, another 6 years and rested a year. When they have done that and come up to the Sabbath of the 7th year, now they've had a year's rest, but they are at the end of their sevens. So this is not a sabbatical year. This 7th year is a year of Jubilee. It's important to understand that because there's going to be some orders that God gives about when you're hiring somebody that you must take into consideration when the year of Jubilee is. The year of Jubilee, I think I'd be safe in saying God created it in order to give everybody a chance to get out of debt. You know, the most industrious among us and the smartest among us and the best worker among us, sometimes things happen. We have medical bills, and even though we've worked hard, we've saved, we find ourselves without money, and now we go to the credit card. But of course, this did not exist then. So what was God's plan for people who occasionally, through no fault of their own, came into this kind of a financial situation? Well, on that year, all debts were over with. You planned on when that year would be. If somebody came to me, and we were living in those years, and someone would come to me and say, I really need to work a few years and make some money. I'd say, oh, let's see. This is 2017. On 2025, well, let's say 2020 is the year of Jubilee. So I will pay you what you're asking now, and you take care of your debts. But you work for me. You're my slave until the year of Jubilee. And when the year of Jubilee comes, you're out of debt. You owe me nothing. This is the year of Jubilee. So after the 7th year, you would have a period where you have 2 years. The 7th sabbatical year, and then the year of Jubilee. Count off 7 Sabbaths of years. 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to a period of 49 years. 7 times 7 is 49. This is very, very close to the 490 years that was prophesied before Jesus returns. And we are 7 years short. On Sunday, in a few weeks, because this Sunday we'll be going into the rising from the dead of Lazarus. And that means we're getting very close to Palm Sunday. And that means on Palm Sunday, we are 7 years short of Jesus' return to earth. But time stopped. So we have 7 years to go. And Christ comes back for the second time to rule on earth. When does this little vacation of time that we've got end or begin? The 490 years less 7, or 483, was Palm Sunday. So we've got 7 years, and Jesus returns to earth to rule for 1,000 years. Well, we've got 7 years left. After the rapture, the resurrection of the saints, there will be a period of 7 years of tribulation. And then Jesus returns with those that he has raptured and rules for 7 years. Have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. Sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow, do not reap what grows of itself. Some things just keep growing. You don't have to plant them again, like grapes, for example, or trees. For it is a jubilee, and it is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the field. In this year of jubilee, everyone is to return to his own property. If you had to sell your property or loan it out, you tried to do it from somebody of your own tribe, or first of all, of your own family. Think of the story of Ruth and Boaz, the rich man. And Ruth was told by her mother-in-law, it is best to go to within our family and see if we can get you married off. And that's exactly what they were talking about. In the year of Jubilee, everybody is to return to his own property. If you have had to leave yours and rent it to somebody, that all ends on the year of Jubilee. Verse 18, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you shall live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. You can ask, what shall we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest crops? I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. Now, right now we're talking about manna. But as soon as they get through with what they're doing in Sinai, at the foot of Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, and you go into the land I prepared for you, because we're talking 50 years, and that's a bit down the road. The land must be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you are but aliens and my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as a possession. Now, they aren't there yet. That doesn't come till the book of Joshua. After Leviticus, we have Numbers, and then we have Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is kind of a rewrite or a reminder of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. So when we get through with this particular period, and it's time to go into the promised land, then that will be 50 years. The land is mine, and you're but aliens and my tenants. God gave them the land as long as they're his people. You must provide for the redemption of the land. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come to redeem what the countryman has sold. If, however, a man has no one to redeem it for him, but he himself prospers and acquires sufficient means, Nobody wants to buy it, but hey, he doesn't need to sell it. He's to determine the value for the years he sold it and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it. All right, I'm skipping around because I've given you some information, and I think that I'm just repeating enough verses so that you can see that what I've given you is in fact scriptural. If a man sells a house in a walled city, who cares whether the city's got a wall around it? Well, that's secure. If you're living in a tent out in the middle of nowhere, it's not secure. During this time, he may redeem it. If it's not redeemed before a full year is passed, the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer and his descendants. Just some of the little details that they've got to work out. The Levites always have the right to redeem their houses in the Levitical towns. The Levites, that's the priests, but the other people who work too, the doorkeepers, the singers, the people who blew trumpets, the people who made music, the people who cooked the showbread, the people who made the oil, for all of those people. They weren't all priests, but they were all Levites. They worked so many days, and while they worked in the temple, they ate from the sacrifices. Remember, a man would bring an animal, the animal would be killed. Part of that animal would be sacrificed, but not all of it. The part which was not burned up was for food for the Levites and for their families. So the property of the Levites is redeemable. Now, all they had was a house. They didn't have vineyards. They didn't have forests. They didn't have cornfields, because their work was in the tabernacle. So they didn't have all this stuff. They had a place to go when they weren't on duty. So when it's talking about the Levites' property, that's what it's talking about. If the pasture land belonged to the towns must be sold, it is their permanent possession. Do not take interest of any kind. Interest is money you make by loaning or giving your property or money to somebody. God said you do your business because business has to be done, but don't make money from it. Take your credit card. If you buy something that's $25, you pay $25 for it. The credit card company doesn't get 19% if your credit's not too good, and 4%, 3%, or whatever it is if your credit's good. Do not take credit. Muslims do not take credit. Now, that's why they have special banks. Very difficult to find a bank that does not take, does not make interest, because that's how they exist. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. Don't use another Israeli as a slave. A slave is your property. There's a difference between somebody that works for you and a slave. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country. You can will them to your children. Honey, when you're 21, you get these 4 slaves. If an alien or a temporary resident among you becomes rich, and one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells himself to the alien, got that? If a Jordanian, which is right next to Israel, comes in and an Israeli sells himself to him, then he becomes a slave. He retains the right of redemption after he sold himself. Under those circumstances, he does not become somebody's slave forever. This whole thing of the year of Jubilee was to eventually get people out of whatever situation they got themselves into temporarily because of, we could say, bad luck or things that happen. If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands, I will send you rain in its season. When it's supposed to rain, it's rain. I went into my room and the television was on, and one of these warning things came on. Apparently, it covers all of Southern California and part of some other states. And so it had nothing to do with us, but it interrupted some programs to say there was going to be a horrible rain someplace, to be very careful of it. I will grant peace in the land, and you will lie down, and no one will make you afraid. You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall by the sword before you. 5 of you will chase 100. 5 of you. Yeah, that's pretty much who we've got here today. 5 will chase 100, but 100 will chase 10,000, and your enemies will fall by the swords before you. See, it's not how strong you are. It's not how numerous you are. It's, are you serving God? All right. I will look upon you with favor, and I will increase your numbers. This is a rather long, we're in the chapter 26, and we have only 27 chapters in Leviticus. I guess we will get through with it today. Now, in verse 14, he talks about punishment for disobedience. It's not God's plan for us to disobey him. He doesn't bless us because we do whatever we want to do. But if you will not listen to me and carry out these commands, if you reject my decrees and abhor my laws and fail to carry out my commands and so violate my covenant, covenant is a degree. I'm sorry, an agreement. We have the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Covenant, this is what God commands that we do, and the New Testament, the New Covenant, this is what God commands us to do at this particular time. Then I will do this to you, and I will bring, let's see, if you reject my decrees and fail to carry out, and you violate my agreement, my covenant, then I'll bring unto you terror. You don't know what it is to be wasting diseases, fervor that will destroy your sight and drain your life. You'll plant seeds in vain. You'll plant seeds, but nothing will grow. I will set my face against you. Those, your enemies that hate you, They will rule over you. And you will flee even when no one is pursuing you. I like that. No one's chasing you, but you're running scared. If after all of this you still don't listen to me, I will punish you for your sins 7 times older. I will break down your stubborn pride and make the sky above you like iron and the ground beneath you like bronze. Your strength will be spent in vain. You'll work, but you'll accomplish nothing. You'll plant, you won't get crops. If you remain hostile toward me and refuse to listen to me, I will multiply your afflictions 7 times over. If in spite of all of this, verse 23, you do not accept my correction. See, this is not God's punishment. This is God's correction. He's not beating up on you. He's showing you a better way. If you don't, then I will withdraw you into your cities. I will send a plague on you. You will be given into your enemies' hands. 10 women will be able to bake your bread in the oven, and they will dole out bread by weight, and you will eat but not be satisfied. Things are going to be tough. I was born during the Depression following the First War. In spite of this, we would think they'd learn. In spite of this, if you remain hostile, I myself will punish you for your sins 7 times over. I will destroy your high places, cut down your incense altars. What business have they got with an altar of incense? God told him, I'm your God. Have no other gods before me. I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham. And I will remember the land. For the land will be deserted by them and will enjoy its Sabbaths. The land will enjoy the Sabbath. The land is going to rest also in the year of Jubilee and on the sabbatical years. In spite of this, I will not reject them or for them to destroy them, because that would be breaking my covenant with them. I'm the Lord your God, but for their sake, I will remember the covenant. Who did he make that covenant with? He says here, with their ancestors that I brought out of Egypt in the sight of the nations. Every nation eventually knew that these Israelis were brought out of Egypt. Excuse me. These are the decrees and the laws and the regulations that the Lord established on Mount Sinai between himself and the Israelites through Moses. Now we're down to the last chapter. Let's do it. Then we'll be through with the book of Leviticus, and next week, after viewing possibly the end of the movie, we will go into the book of Numbers. Redeeming what is the Lord's. A lot of times we talk about my this, my that, my, and we forget it's God's. It's ours to use. It's like the family car. It belongs to Dad. I get to drive it, but it's not mine. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if anybody makes a special vow to dedicate persons to the Lord by giving equivalent values, set the value of a male between the ages of 20 and 60 at 50 shekels." We're talking about how much are we going to pay for a slave. If it's a person between the ages of 5 and 20, set the value of a male at 20 shekels. If it's a person between 1 month and 5 years, talking about a little kid, set the value of silver, that of a female, at 3 shekels. If it's a person 60 years or more, etc. If anyone making the vow is too poor to pay the specified amount, he's saying, I'm suggesting how much you pay somebody if they're going to do a contract with you over working and being at your service for a particular period of time. If what he vowed is an animal that is acceptable as an offering to the Lord, the animal will be given to the Lord and becomes holy. Don't exchange it or substitute it for a good one, for a bad one, or for a bad one for a good one. The animal must be presented to the priest. He will judge its quality as good or bad, and they do that now. This year, I believe it was in April, when Rabbi, the one that they asked to be the high priest, when he did his reenactment of what they would be doing if they had a temple and are doing what they used to do and what they want to do in the future as soon as possible, they had somebody looking at the animal. They had, now they have a red heifer, but for a long time they thought they had one and didn't, because the examining rabbi, that's what makes something kosher or not, if you ever wonder. There's got to be a rabbi present when they're cooking up the hot dog or the corn dog or whatever, to determine that everything is kosher, that everything is what it's supposed to be. Some rabbi found 4 white hairs on the red heifer, so he was no longer kosher. If a man dedicates his house as something holy to the Lord, the priest will judge its quality, whether it's good or bad, and if the man dedicates his house, redeems it. This is what he's talking about. And the price of redemption is 20% or 1/5. If you decide you're going to give your house to the Lord, and then pretty soon you decide you're going to take it back, the value of it is what you pay, plus an extra 20% because you goofed. If a man dedicates to the Lord part of his family land, the value is set the same way, 50 shekels of silver and etc. But if he dedicates his field after the Jubilee, the 50th year after you've had 7 sevens, the 50th year, the year of Jubilee, if you do it after that, the priest will determine the value according to the number of years that remain until the next year of Jubilee. The value of the house will not be 300,000. If it's 10 years before the year of Jubilee, the house might be worth 100,000. If it's a long time before, it might be worth $1 million or $500,000. If a man dedicates to the Lord a field he bought that isn't part of his family land, the priest will determine its value using the year of Jubilee. Because in the year of Jubilee, everything goes back to its original owner. Every value is to be set according to the sanctuary shekel, 20 gerahs to the shekel. No one, however, may dedicate the firstborn of an animal, since the firstborn already belongs to the Lord. They were to take the first part of their crop, the first animal that's born, and it belonged to the Lord. So if you've already given it to the Lord, you can't give it to him again because it's already his. If it's one of the unclean animals, a snake, a pig, he may buy it back and set its value, adding a fifth of the value to it, 20%. Nothing that a man owns and devotes to the Lord, whether it's an animal, family land, may be sold or redeemed. Everything is holy to the Lord. No person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. He must be put to death. This year of Jubilee doesn't mean if you've been found guilty and are going to be executed, you don't get to be redeemed just because it's a special year. I'm almost through. The entire tithe of the herd of the flock, that would be 10%. We're not talking money yet. The tithe of the flocks. Every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod is holy to the Lord. So the shepherd has got this field of animals, and he holds out his rod until 10. Here goes, I'm running out of things on my desk. Here goes a sheep under the rod. Here goes another sheep under the rod. When 10 sheep have gone under the rod, the next one is God's. And then you do it again. He must not pick out the good from the bad. You can't say, oh, make sure that that one goes 9th because I want that one for me. Can't do that. Both the animal and its substitute become holy and cannot be redeemed. They're the 10th. These are the commands that the Lord gave Moses on Mount Sinai for the Israelites. And now we come to the book of Numbers. That's where we start. And we've got 20 minutes to go. We're doing very well. We got the movie through the getting into their hands the Temple Mount, the El Aqsa Mosque, or the Blue Mosque, is on that land, and you saw them all line up in front of it to have their pictures made. Proof that the land they're on is the Temple Mount. We did pretty good with the movie, and we made good time getting through the book of Leviticus. Now we're in Numbers. Let me close the video, and then we'll see if we have anything to chat about. and look for more videos. They'll start coming now. Blessings on you.